All right. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Al Alonzo. I've been a resident of New Milford since 1998 when I bought my house here, and I'm running for mayor. A couple things about myself is I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for 25 years. I specialize in land use law, and I do a fair amount of litigation work. I was on the council for 1 year, well actually one term, which ended 2 years ago. And I've also been participating in sports in terms of like Little League. And I managed a team for 8 years when my son was playing. I also sponsored a team. I worked very hard in town, and I believe that I'm qualified. Now, I'm running against Mike Petrino, and Mike Petrino is running for mayor. He was invited to be here this evening. Originally, he had agreed to attend, and then he decided that he was not going to attend and having another event at another location. Now, Mike is a nice guy. I like Mike. But being a nice guy does not qualify you to be mayor. What I'm hoping for this evening is to be able to answer your questions, provide you the information so that you can make the determination as to who is more qualified. I have my running mates here, Joanne Preisendorf and Jeffrey Del Vecchio. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And then we'll open it up just really for questions, anything that you have to ask. Joanne?
Hi, thank you everybody for coming. If you guys don't know who I am, I'm Joanne Preisendorf. I've lived here since 1994. I've put 2 children through the school system, my son all the way up to 12th grade and my daughter up to 8th grade, and then she chose to go to a Catholic high school for no reason except it's what she wanted to do, and I wanted her to be happy. I've been very involved in the community. Little League, I used to donate all the food for Little League sausage and pepper sandwiches. I've been on the planning board for 9 years. I've been a Girl Scout leader. I've been a basketball coach with my son Brenton. My son Brenton is a River Edge police officer. I'm very proud of that. And he, once again, like I said, has gone through the whole 12 years here. I look forward to answering questions. I look forward to representing New Milford and trying to hear what everybody has to say so we can all work together for New Milford specifically. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Del Vecchio. I've lived in town about 18 years now, actually precisely 18 years now. I live here with my wife and 3 young boys. I have 3 kids in 3 different schools right now, so the education system is very important to me. I'm a part of the recycling committee, part of the environmental commission, and I was part of the green team for its short duration. I've also worked for the Township of Teaneck at DPW. I'm a mechanic supervisor over there, so I deal with town budgets, and we're always trying to save money. So I have an idea of how that kind of thing works at a municipal level, which is a lot different from at a business level. I was going to say something else, and I can't remember now, because I didn't write it down. But I was a volunteer firefighter when I used to live in Rutherford, so emergency services are very important to me. I think it's great that we're going to be getting a new fire truck. Actually, I work on the trucks in Teaneck myself. I work on the police cars. So emergency services are huge for me. As is the environment. I have solar panels. I drive an electric car. As I said, I'm part of the recycling committee, part of the environmental commission. I'm very passionate about things like recycling and trying to keep this town, clean and sustainable, if you will. We have limited resources, so we don't want to squander them. And I guess, hopefully, I can answer your questions. Thank you.
All right, so does anybody want to start with a question? Mary McElroy?
I'll start. First, I want to thank all 3 of you for running. It's probably a thankless job, I'm sure it is. I appreciate you putting your names in for office and the work that you've all done in town already. Could you, each of you, just describe briefly what you think are the #1 threats right now that our town faces?
To me, the biggest threat, obviously, is taxes. There's very limited powers that a municipal government has. And we're here for property taxes, health and safety with the police department, with the fire department, the ambulance corps, some services that we provide. Education is separate with the Board of Education. But essentially, we run a budget. Our budget in New Milford is about $20 million. And the problem with New Milford is that we have very little industry. So the tax burden is borne by all the residents, the homeowners of the property. So when we make decisions on spending money, it's very important to consider all of the residents, not just a particular group that's looking to advance whatever agenda it is that they want to advance, which obviously you consider that, but you consider it in terms of the town as a whole. And I say that because when I moved into 1998 to town, my taxes were $3,000. And I remember speaking to my neighbor, I live in a cul-de-sac. She had lived there for 50 years. She was a widow, obviously retired. And she was complaining that at that time taxes were going up $200 to $400 per year. And there were no services that were being provided. And she was afraid that eventually she was going to be forced out of town, and she was. She wound up selling her house and moving to a retirement village, where ultimately she passed away. But she was essentially forced out, she told me, because of the taxes. One of the problems that I see in town is decisions that are being made without accountability, without transparency, spending without a plan on how to spend the money, which ultimately results in higher taxes. I know that in the past 8 years, we've had a lot of advances. For example, when Mayor Zabrizzi became the mayor, we had a $100,000 surplus. By proper planning, she was able to build that to $4.3 million last year. In addition, she made the decisions in terms of negotiating the police contracts, where, as you probably see in the newspaper, a lot of times police officers retire and they have, because of their contracts, they're entitled to a large payout, sick days, vacation days are not used. Sometimes you have $250,000, $350,000 payouts, which ultimately, if you're not funded for that, the taxpayers have to pay for that. So between a combination of saving $400,000 a year into a lockbox, which right now, I believe we have $1.2 million, and the next payment will bring us up to $1.6 million. We're essentially funding the future officers who are going to be retiring, and not in the very near future, without having to burden the taxpayers, do that without increasing taxes. Also, she negotiated contracts where the payouts now are $20,000. So new hires, they can only expect a $20,000 payout at the end of their career. So that's the type of the planning that's going on. There's a number of things, and hopefully with other questions I'll get into it, but I'll just touch upon it. When we understand that there's a large expenditure that's coming up, we need to plan for it. For example, when we did the police department and we did the 2 firehouses, they were planned for it, understanding that at the time that those bonds would come due, our older debt was going to be retired. So you're replacing one payment with another payment, and essentially your taxes are stable. When we did the firehouses, we understood that they needed to be expanded because the fire equipment that we had was going to be outdated and needed to be replaced, and those firehouses could not accommodate the larger vehicles that were being built. So we spent $2.1 million to renovate the 2 firehouses, anticipating the purchase of these new fire trucks. We just received a grant of $750,000 for a fire truck, so now we're committed to buying it. The fire truck is $1.5 million. We're going to be paying about $600,000 for this truck, but there's no plan in place on how to pay for it. Same thing with the Kennedy Field. Beautiful field. We needed the fields to be upgraded, but it was done in such a way that there is no plan on how it's going to be paid for. The field was $2.8 million. We received 25% grant from Green Acres, plus another $125,000 from Bergen County Open Space. So we have about a $2 million bill that's going to be coming up, and we have no plan on how that's going to be paid for. Again, that ultimately is going to be bonded and have to be paid in the future, or it's going to be paid for your taxes. With respect to that $4 million, this year your municipal taxes are going up only $27 because they took $2.1 million of that surplus and applied it to the budget this year. So our $4.3 million that we worked so hard to get up in a period of 8 years has gone down by 50% in just 1 year. So to me, the accountability and the transparency on the council is very important so that we make these decisions understanding that yes, things have to get done. We definitely need to improve the fields. I was the one who started the field committee back then in my first year on the council. But decisions had to be made, changes had to be made along the way because other things came up, such as the Suez field. Certain members on the council refused to change or adjust and just wanted to push it through without planning. So as if we stand here today, they're already playing sports in that field, again, beautiful field, but there were other things that we should have considered for future planning, such as improvements to the senior center. I believe that we need a recreation building for the kids to go to, other than just on the fields, because sometimes you want to be inside. Williams Field, we have 450 kids who are signed up for soccer, and we have some gas-generated lights, which is not sufficient for the amount of play that they have. So one of the things that we had brought up was putting lights in Kennedy, taking some of the money from Kennedy Field and bringing it to the Williams Field for lights. It wasn't done, so now we have an estimate for $750,000. The council voted that down, so again, there's no lights. The library, which I believe could have been repurposed. It's a large building. It's underutilized. The senior center needs to be renovated, so we could have moved the seniors in there, or we could have made that part of a recreation building since it's close to the fields. We've been patching the roof there over a period of time. It's gotten to the point where the roof has to be completely replaced. Again, that could have been something in a master plan, which could have been and should have been discussed prior to the field just being pushed through. So to me, the biggest concern is proper planning and having the foresight to anticipate other problems and then being able to pay for it. Because at the end of the day, if you can't pay for it, your taxes are going to go up and it's going to hurt all the residents. So I think Mary also wanted to hear from the other candidates.
I think you
And
said
I'm sorry about the little
you
long
said it
winded.
all. I'm gonna go off of what Al said as well, as far as basically he really kind of discussed everything. But you know, I was at the Senior Citizen Center, and you know, they're taking an exercise class and there's no room. I mean, they're squished. You know, there's just no room. And I really feel that, you know, our kids have a really great place to go. I think our seniors need a really good place to go as well, and we can't forget that. I think we need to involve everybody, and I think what happens is I think we get so caught up with, you know, party affiliation that I just think that we should, just, you know, really just talk and really just listen to what, you know, I've been on the planning board 9 years. It's a long time. And there's a lot of things that I profess to say, I don't know a lot, you know. I listen to what other people have to say, and sometimes I might think something one way when I hear it on the planning board, when I listen to what somebody else has to say, no less any party affiliation, but just listen, it makes sense to me. Maybe they can tell me something I don't know, but if you don't listen and put aside, you know, your affiliation and just think about what the people are asking of you and try to work it out and communicate with each other, I think you're going to have more results. And right now I feel like that hasn't been done. And I think we need to listen to everybody. And I think if we do and we put plans in motion, I think that that's going to make a better New Milford.
So I remember what I was going to say before, and that had to do with negotiating contracts. So part of my job, I was a union president for several years, and I was always involved with negotiating the contracts. So that experience, I think I can take on the flip side, because I know how the processes work. I know as an employee what's important, but I also, as a manager, I also know what's important to the town. And I really think I could do a lot to try to keep some spending in check, you know, as far as that's concerned. I mean, obviously you want the employees to get what they deserve, but, you know, as taxpayers, you know, we're on the hook for that. So there's a fair balance that you have to try to reach. And, you know, along those same lines with the budgets, there's a lot of things in budgets that often can be cut out and get missed just because of familiarity. You know, like, oh, it's always been there, you know, so, and it goes through. And as an example, at my job now, they used to have a line item for like repairing of fax machines. And, you know, like how many people really had a fax machine, but it was like $50 a year, every department had it. For $50 you go buy a new fax machine. But we're paying like for this service, you know, the company didn't do anything, you would call them up, they're like, well, nothing to do with these fax machines, they're 10 years old. So they finally took that out, because they realized it didn't make any sense. You could buy a couple of new fax machines, stick them on a shelf, and if you needed it, you just grabbed it and gave it to somebody. Another thing we did at work was, when I first started there, they used to have 2 different grades of gasoline. They had 87 and 89 octane. The 89 octane was a throwback to when the cars used leaded gasoline, and the town still had them, but they couldn't get leaded gasoline anymore. Well, we don't have those kind of cars anymore. Most of the vehicles out on the road, police cars and whatnot, they use 87 octane. So did a little research, and the town was paying thousands of dollars extra for gasoline that they didn't need. So now we don't buy it anymore, and over the course of 10 plus years, tens of thousands of dollars have been saved. Something simple that no one ever really thought about, because it was just there and you just did it, and they didn't necessarily know the reasons why. So I think, having a fresh set of eyes looking at the budget can really help out. I know Kelly's done similar, looking over things, and just reviewing it, and like I said, it's just sometimes, it's nobody's fault, they're not doing it on purpose, it's just there and you don't think about it, and I think I can really help with that because I'm kind of in tune with it. I know I can sit here and tell you, cut taxes, it's kind of hard to cut taxes, everything goes up. You go to the grocery store, the bill, I think it's more every week, so the town has the same issues, things cost more, gasoline costs more, diesel fuel costs more, you have contractual obligations, buying vehicles costs more, but we try to hold the line as much as we can. Town has a budget just like you have a budget, so you can't just spend money willy-nilly. That's what I'd like to try to bring to it. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Tom?
For the first time in New Milford history this year, we're paying a grants writer a monthly retainer of $3,000 to be on as a professional grants writer. We've never paid for a grants writer on a retainer ever in the history of New Milford. We usually, Marlene Casey, for several years, at least 15 to 20 that I know, who's a resident of the town, has been our grants writer, and she was paid a percentage of any grants that she had obtained for the town. What would you do if you were elected mayor in regard to the grants writer situation here that we're now paying $36,000 a year for?
Right, I think you're referring to Millennium Strategies, and for those who don't know what happened, Dom is correct. We have a grants writer, and a grants writer is a professional service. So what we do is we put out an RFQ in October for all the different professional services. People will submit, and then the council will appoint somebody, whether it's an attorney, an engineer, an architect, a grants writer, and so on. Marlene Casey has always been our grants writer. We have an exception recently that Kelly has been working on with the fire department, because there's special grants that they're applied for, and Kelly has been very successful in getting us, I don't know how much, big numbers? $950,000 in grants that goes towards the fire department, which got us to Scott Pax and got us the money for the new fire truck. The way the process works is that all the council members would get a package of all the RFQs. And then there's a resolution approving these different professionals. And then the resolutions are distributed to the board members, so at the reorg meeting, you can just put it through as a consent agenda. When Mike Petrino was elected, but before he was sworn in December, he asked that Millennium Strategies be included as a grants writer. Now, they should have had this separate resolution. They didn't. What they did was they put Millennium Strategies in the back of Marlene Casey's resolution. And that amended resolution was not distributed to the council members. So unfortunately, the mayor was not able to attend the reorg meeting, so Mike was sworn in as a council member, was immediately made the council president. He, knowing that this resolution was in the package, puts it forward for a consent agenda vote. I don't know how she did it, but Kelly probably is the only one who reads these resolutions. As she's flipping through it, she notices that there's a Millennium Strategies behind Marlene Casey in the same resolution. She started asking questions, and nobody would answer the question, including Mike Petrino. One answered the question who this Millennium Strategies is. So the resolution gets approved. Millennium Strategy was getting paid $3,000 a month for grants writing, irrespective of whether or not any grants were actually obtained. So we started doing some research, you Google it, and it's all democratically controlled company. From Bernadette McPherson, who was the former Democratic chairwoman of the county freeholders and the mayor of Rutherford, all the way down to members of Murphy's campaign committee, some assemblymen, all democratically appointed or elected officials. So when that was brought to the attention, a new resolution was put forward, and I went into the meeting. I asked Mike, why are you allowing this to happen? And he said, it's a good investment. So knowing that we had this forum coming up, I Oprah'd the Millennium Strategies invoicing, and it turns out that, yes, they got us grants. We have $17,000 in grants through September, but they've been paid $27,000. So it's cost us money in order to get the grants, which makes absolutely no sense. So obviously, if Marlene Casey could have done those same grants applications, it would have cost us substantially less because she would have gotten a percentage. So this is the types of investments that my opponent wants to make. And I have a problem, number one, making that investment, and number two, the way that it was done. I thought it was pretty sneaky. But obviously, in the future, any grants writer has the right to submit an RFQ. It would be reviewed by the council as a whole, and ultimately the decision would be made. And if I was the mayor, that would not be in the resolution. And again, the mayor was not at that meeting, so it was done under Mike's watch.
So is there, for this millennial, is there, in their contract, is there a quota of a minimum number of grants they're supposed to apply for? And historically, how many grants have we applied for that might make that $36,000 seem like either a good deal or a bad deal?
Actually, there is no requirement. The only thing that they said they would do is they would meet with the various departments on a monthly basis and make recommendations. But that's what Marlene Casey was doing. And Marlene Casey would always come to the council and make recommendations, and sometimes the council said yes. Because don't forget, even though you get a grant, sometimes they're matching grants. So you have to match it dollar for dollar, and sometimes they're reimbursement grants. So you have to assess what the need is, and you have to assess whether or not the grant is something that you even are interested in doing. The other thing that was interesting when I Oprah'd the Millennium Records for this past year, I spoke with Christina Maris, our borough administrator, and she indicated that a number of those grants that they were recommending were grants that Marlene Casey would have applied for anyway. So they were duplicating the services, but they were getting paid for it. So.
I'd like to know about the new ShopRite and the new bank that are being put up at the north end of town. If those businesses will be able to keep down our property taxes, how is that going to affect our property taxes?
That's a very complex question because there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I tend to be a little long-winded, so if I am, just throw something at me and I'll try to stop. I think first we have to understand the history. Okay, one of the things that we keep getting bashed on is that the property should have been purchased in 2011. Mayor Zabrizzi was elected in 2010. There was an agreement with United, at that time it was United Water, which gave the borough a right of first refusal to purchase the property in the event that it was going to be sold privately. And it was private land. At the time it was 2011, and people said we should have purchased it. You have to understand that it's a remediated sludge pit. Now, when you talk to people, the same person that tells you it's a remediated sludge pit, how dare you build something next to the high school, you can get contaminated, is the same person that's going to tell you that it's a pristine piece of green land and should be preserved for recreation space. So you can't have it both ways. It's either one or the other. But in any event, 2011. Now, as a land use attorney, I can tell you that I remember 2008 very well. Because in 2008, the market crashed, and we had the Great Recession. In 2011, we were still suffering from that Great Recession. And I remember driving around town, because I'm also a real estate attorney, and seeing a lot of properties in New Milford that were financially distressed. They were either underwater, they were in foreclosure, they were abandoned. So we were having problems just keeping our residents in town. At the same time, we were having a problem with the police department. The police department was understaffed, there were not enough promotions. They were all working, like, so sergeants were working as patrolmen and lieutenants were working as sergeants. So we had a big liability issue there because promotions were not being made. So financially or fiscally, it was a bad time to spend $3 million on a piece of property just to let it sit there. And if you're going to utilize it, you would probably have to spend another several $1 million just to make it usable, whether as active or passive or recreation uses. They were saying, well, build a field. Well, how are you going to build a field? We don't have any money. So people were in financial distress, personally and in business in town. It was not the right time to be spending that kind of money. So since we passed on it, then obviously it was sold. It was sold to a developer who then went ahead and made a presentation to the town. That was in April of 2011. They were asking the town to rezone the property for a commercial use, which would have been the ShopRite. At the time, there was a bank pad, and I believe also they were proposing a restaurant, and they were going to subdivide part of the property and give us a field, which ultimately is what we have. At the time, and still, that piece of property pays $64,000 a year in real estate taxes because it's taxed as a utility, not just as private land. So you have at the time it was 16 acres before we subdivided to 13 acres. $64,000. So you compare that to what you're paying for your lot, maybe to 75 by 100, is substantially less than what could be realized in terms of ratables. The council passed at that time on rezoning the property, so the developer went in and filed an application before the zoning board. That's when I first got involved in town, other than sports. And we had 50 hearings over a period of 2 years. And as a land use attorney, I fought that. And ultimately we won. And the zoning board denied the application. The interesting part, and again, this is when my opening comments was whether or not I or Mike Petrino, my running mate, are qualified to be mayor. Mike had the opportunity at that time to make a decision as to whether or not the property should have been rezoned. In May of 2013, the mayor asked the council to give their opinions. My understanding is that Mike told half the town that he wanted to rezone the property and told the other half of the town that he wanted to preserve it for environmental purposes. That meeting was packed, and I remember being at the meeting. And Mike was the last one to vote. And when he got to his vote, and he would be the tie-breaking vote, his vote was maybe. I vote maybe on rezoning, which that's obviously pandering to both sides. He didn't know which side to go with. Ultimately, he made the decision not to rezone the property, which put us into litigation. Actually, 3 cases ensued from that, and they were all consolidated, and they started to be litigated. At that time, I ran for council, and I was asked to head the negotiations with the developer to see if we can come up with some kind of a resolution to the case, because we also had what's called a builder's remedy lawsuit, and it's because we didn't meet our affordable housing components. And then there was a lot of discussion on this on the council. There was a lot of meetings, and we had 3 options. You could either rezone the property the way that ultimately it was done. We can allow them to go to court and let the judge decide, which we know that we would have lost, and we would have wound up with a ShopRite, a multifamily building, the bank, and no field. Or Ira Grodsky had indicated that his vote was to rezone the property for a minimum of 400 apartment units on that property and nothing else. So ultimately, this is what we have. And we have the ShopRite. Obviously, they're going to be paying substantially more than $64,000. That's important because Blue Acres bought out a number of the houses down on Columbia and on Harvard that were being flooded. So we lost those tax ratables, so this is going to help supplement that plus additional money. We also got 4.3 acres of land, which was donated to us. That includes a new field, graded, a 103-space parking lot, which has been paved, and a storm water retention system for a 50-year storm. We also have $750,000 that was donated by the developer so that we can finish it off, whether it's grass or turf and whatever other amenities we can do with that money, plus another $50,000 for future repairs in the event that it were to flood. Now, the flooding is very important because our detractors, one of the things that they argued was that the property was going to flood, so we shouldn't rezone it. Well, this year we had a considerable amount of rain, and I know that we get the messages from OEM, and it almost seems like almost every week we get another message that we're going to flood in town. The property in the area that normally floods has not flooded yet, even with all the torrential rains. So I think, again, with the proper planning that I was talking about, we have this. We also were able to resolve our affordable housing component, because now where the old ShopRite is, they're going to demolish that. We're going to have 12,500 square feet of retail space on the ground floor, 135 apartments, which includes 27 affordable units. So again, we're going to get more tax ratables there. And I think part of the solution in New Milford is to have smart planning and controlled planning. So when our unmet obligation was 250 units, that was our number, the town's number. The state said our unmet obligation was 400 units. That only represents 20% of the total number of units that you have to build. So that negotiation, we were able to get a free field for the borough, which increased our inventory for recreation. And we basically met our unmet obligation with only 27 units, and we were safe for the next 10 years for any further lawsuits. So the short answer is yes, we're going to realize substantial tax ratables from that whole development. Jim?
Hi. This is probably out to everyone, so I can just hear a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't mean to...
No, that's fine. You know, throughout town, you see a peppering of businesses that are sitting, buildings that are sitting empty. Okay, so, as you mentioned, you know, we don't have a strong business base. I think our Chamber of Commerce, technically or officially, is merged with River Edge now, which probably means more of the attention is being given to River Edge than it is to New Milford. What do you all see as future mayor and future council people, ways to encourage businesses to invest in New Milford, even these little small little storefronts along Main Street, River Road, that have opportunities to bring services into town?
Right, well, I know that one new business opened up on River Edge Avenue, which is the Time Out Cafe. So they opened up. I think that ultimately the development of the old ShopRite site with another 12,500 square feet of space is going to help concentrate the businesses more into a local area. I know I go to the Brookchester shopping center a lot because there's a lot of different places in there that I buy from, and it's very convenient. So when you have these businesses spread out throughout the town, sometimes it's difficult or inconvenient to go to the one store. So I think that the development of the ShopRite where it is on Main Street is going to attract some business there. It's going to hopefully liven up Main Street. And I think that the development of the old ShopRite site with the smaller stores will hopefully have the other businesses concentrating into that location. But I think it's important because that will help the ratables and help the residents.
I'd like to just kind of hear the same answer.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I just to kind of piggyback onto that, so we have the new retail space where the old ShopRite is. So there's the potential that existing businesses may say, oh, let me move there, revitalize my business, which then means that those existing spots will become empty, right? So it's kind of almost a circular process. So more to the point of my question was, like, what are we doing? What do you think you can do to encourage additional businesses? You know, because like with the retail that's coming into ShopRite, you'll have that's got to be filled. I mean, you don't know what's going in there yet. Right, so that plus all these little spots you see throughout town, whether they're old dentist offices, you know, things like that are starting to, you know, pepper New Milford. We need to fill them back up. Right? So what's your vision on how to do that?
Well, you know, my concern before I even decided to run for council was you have the old Valley National Bank on Main Street that's been sitting empty forever. And then when I found out that there was going to be a bank right across, I live across the street from the new ShopRite. So, you know, if it's going to affect anybody, it's going to affect me. You know, and I was concerned about that, you know, and you know, whatever we do, somebody's not going to be happy, you know, because you're not going to be able to please everybody. But what I'd like to do, and I don't know if I have a specific answer for that, Jim, but it was upsetting to see the Valley National Bank empty for many, many years. And now you're going to have the Wells Fargo on this south end of town that's going to be empty for hopefully not many, many years. I'd like to just sit with the council that's there now, and then the new council that comes in, which would be us, and put a plan in motion to say, hey, listen, how can we get those places revitalized? You know, what are your thoughts? I don't have the answer right now for that, but I'm willing to listen to what everybody has to say, and I'm willing to put a plan together where it's conducive and everybody agrees upon it to try to make that not vacant space anymore, because that Valley National Bank really, it's an eyesore to me, you know, and it's a building that can be used. So what do we use it for? And I don't have the answer, but I think with all of us, you know, with Kelly and, you know, with Al and Jeff and whoever else remains on the council, you know, I think that we can get a vision, and I think we can do, you know, put all of our heads together, because, you know, we're all business people. You know, I'm a realtor. You know, the last thing I want to do is, you know, I've been selling real estate for 30 years. I know I just gave away my age. The last thing I want to do is just, you know, see everybody lose value, you know, in their homes, because we're all homeowners, you know, and if we don't do something, it's not going to be good. So I think of, you know, many heads together is far better than one. And I think if we just, you know, work together, we can figure out a plan. And I think it'll be a good plan, because I know what New Milford's capable of doing.
I think if you want to draw businesses to town, you need to have the population excited about New Milford. I think that's very important. If people are excited about New Milford and excited